So I filmed this video already like 2 days ago, but upon further reflection, while I was dealing with my hair, and by dealing with it, I just mean doing it, I realized that I liked what I said, but I wanted it to be a lot briefer. So I'm going to try this again. But I don't know what's much more brief than exactly what I'm going to title this video, which is the fact that I wrote a book in 22 days, 23 days. And I just want to go through briefly, how I did so. And I'm really excited. I'm very proud of myself because I've been kind of stuck on it for a while. And as someone who wrote a lot as a child, to the point where my teachers were telling me to go play at recess instead of writing in my little red binder, you, it was kind of a long time coming. So, like I said, I'm proud of myself. So how did I do it? At the end of the day, my word count came out to 77,235. How did I do this? Thank you so much for asking. Basically, this happened in two parts, and I used three things. So part one was outlining, and part two was writing. And the three things that I used were my laptop with the standard writing application. No, I know that there's like softwares you can use for writing. I don't know any names of them, and I've never used one, but just good old standard, good old Pages on my laptop. And then I used two notebooks. This one, which was used for outlining, and this one, which I used for notes. To explain briefly, I ended up getting kind of a spark for an ideal, and along with some characters and some side things. So I have started in the past being like, okay, I want to outline the book from beginning to end, because that way I know that I have like the material, basically. So I'm going to go through kind of what I outlined that allowed me to just roadmap myself and then plow through the writing itself in those 22 days. So basically, the outline is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages, 10-page outline. But keep in mind, this isn't, like a standard size spiral notebook. It's smaller. So on the first part of the outline, the first thing that I did was give not like a back of the book blurb, but a really, really basic overall outline of what the story is about. So kind of some of the background of the world, the characters that'll be in it, and the general plot. Then on the next page, I wrote out characters that I need, because one thing I know about myself is that I tend to get stuck on names, especially for main characters. So for all of my main characters, which for me is a family of four, a boyfriend, two friends, coworkers, things like that, I wrote out everyone, their relationship to the main character specifically, and I gave all of them names. Whether or not I keep names is a different story, but everyone got a name, so that way when I got to their character and story, I could just come to this page, put the name in, and move on. So that way I wasn't stuck trying to think of a name for way longer than I needed to. And even when I ended up having characters that I wrote in outside of these characters, I literally just picked a key on the keyboard, pressed it, thought of the first name that came in my mind, put that name in, and moved on. The only problem is I didn't note any of those names down, so that's going to have to kind of be something that I do on the back end. Anyway, moving on. So for this particular book, the world it's not a fantasy, it's not even a hardcore dystopian, but the history of the world is different than the history that we lived here. So I gave myself a brief overview of the history and kind of the impacts that it's had within their version of the world. After that is when I got to like my scene by scene slash plotline part of the outline. On this one, I had an opening line that I wanted to use. So I put that first. And then afterwards, I kind of outlined different scenes that I want. And for each different scene, I called that a chapter. So I ended up outlining, I think it was 18 chapters, including the epilogue. Yeah, like 18, 19 chapters, including the epilogue. And some of them were just like a number and then the scene that I wanted to go down. Like one of them, it literally says for work incident. But then for others, it ended up getting a longer description or even part of the dialogue or part of the scene that I knew I wanted to have happen. So for the very first chapter, I knew that there was kind of this implied dynamic that I wanted to be able to present to people. So I wrote out that part of the scene here. And it was really good because that ended up sparking a lot of ideals for kind of where the book could go and the impacts that it could have. So me writing that out enabled me to use those characters from that scene as not just one-offs and to keep them throughout the book, and they ended up having like a pretty significant impact. So that's kind of how I handled my outline. If I knew that there was something that I wanted to include in the scene, then I would have handed wrote it. But if I just knew that this scene needs to go here, then I put that scene there and I moved on. But that's literally my outline. Each chapter got what needed to happen, maybe some details, and then I moved on. I didn't like hardcore spend time outlining. I think the outlining might have taken a week. But when I'm saying that I wrote the book in a month, I'm saying from the time I started putting words into a document until I ended, then that took 22 days. If you want to add 7 days to that for the outlining, then go ahead. But in all honesty, the total time I probably spent outlining was probably like 3 hours. So once I finished my outline, I started writing. And then the only reason why I used the bigger book throughout my writing process, or bigger notebook throughout my writing process, was to make notes. So anytime I noticed like a character inconsistency or flaw that wouldn't be like a good character flaw, but it's like an annoying character flaw, I'd make a note of that. Plot holes, make a note of that. Something that needs to be added, make a note of that. Changed, make a note of that. I made all these notes so I made all these notes instead of going back in the draft. Because as soon as I finished writing my prologue, I actually wanted to change literally like one of the most pivotal scenes from that part to a completely different context. And I got to the end and I was like, I want to change that to this. But then I would have had to go back up, probably delete like 2,000 to 3,000 words, rewrite that, and then keep moving. So instead of doing that, I just made a note of it and I kept writing. And I'm going to go back and change it later. But for me, the main purpose of this book was make a note of everything so that way you can just keep writing. Main point, do not stop writing. And then the other thing that I did in here was I made a note of the word count of each chapter. I'm not exactly sure why. I feel like mainly for editing purposes. Just so I'm not ending up with chapters that are super long and then ones that are super short. There's definitely a few that I'm going to have to go in and break up. Particularly right now, my chapter 10 is sitting at 13,025 words. And I already thought of like where I need to break that one up at. It's going to end up getting broken down into like 3 chapters. That'll be around 4,000 words each. But yeah, that's literally all that's in here. And that was like barely 2 pages. It's like 2.25 pages of notes. So yeah, so that's step 1 to how I did it. And then step 2 was I set myself a daily goal. I have this book on my back shelf. It's called 1,000 Words, and it's essentially a compilation of notes and letters and advice from authors who all entered this challenge over a summer to write 1,000 words a day for their project. And so initially and for a long time, I was using that model to write 1,000 words a day on my project to get to the end, but that just wasn't working for me. I'm a little impatient. So instead of doing 1,000 words a day, I did 4,000 words a day, and I did it in 2 writing sessions of 2,000 words. I only did the 4,000 straight through twice. But other than that, I did 2,000 words break, however long of a break it needed to be. Sometimes it was like an hour, sometimes it was a full day, and then another 2,000 words. I started on July 1st, and I wrote 1,000 words that night. And then every day after that, I wrote the full 4,000 words, except for one day when we were on vacation. I only wrote 2,000 words because we had been out all day. And then I missed one day in there too. So it didn't even take 22 days. Technically, it took 21 days. But I digress. I feel like what was kind of helpful for me using this particular method and setup was that number one, I tried to take the things that always stopped me from writing my drafts fully, and I made a note of them because I feel like those things that you think about why your book will be bad is actually what's going to make you a good writer. If you can sit here, write to yourself and say, this character is so annoying, this doesn't make any sense, her pattern of thinking keeps changing. If you know that, then that means you're able to go back and fix it. So just make a note of it and keep writing. I think that's what this doing my writing this way, like this particular method, it just forced me to keep going, and that's what I need to do. So as far as next steps go, I'm really proud of myself and being able to say that I wrote the novel in 22 days, technically 21, but just counting. Um, but as far as like the actual thing itself, like we all know that this is a messy first draft. I'm sure, more seasoned authors are probably able to put out something a little bit more passable, a little bit more polished on a first draft. But for me, what I have is I've got words on paper, and those words need a lot of work. I fully acknowledge that, but the fact that the words are there and they're done is really exciting to me. So all the advice that I've read so far, because I don't really make it this far, is that I now have to leave my book alone for like a month to 3 months was kind of what I see, was what I was seeing. Like 4 to 12 weeks, you should put to the side, forget what you put in there, and like just out of sight, out of mind, remove it. So that way you can come back in and start editing a lot more objectively, and you'll be able to catch more plot holes that way. If you don't remember what's going on in the plots, you're reading it through the eyes of someone who will be reading it for the first time. And so then those things that make sense to you because you wrote it, you're able to catch them. So as much as, again, I mentioned I'm impatient, but I'm taking the time away from it so that way I can start going through my first round of edits with a more open perspective. Outside of this novel, I already have ideals for things that I like kind of want to do. I'm thinking about possibly going back to some of my old projects and trying to get those done as well. But I also think it's important for me to take a break from writing in general. So that way I'm not mixing up characters and tones of voices and all of that. Because, a new novel should sound different. It should sound new. And if I were to ever become published one day, I wouldn't want one work to sound exactly like another work to sound exactly like another work. I wouldn't want to be defined as like a one trick pony author. I want to be able to write across genres, across characters, all of those things. So before I jump into any of those ideas, even though I have some really good ones that are currently sitting in my notes app, I'm going to leave it maybe until like August, which is in like 4 days. But just a little break from all of that. As far as this book goes, will it be published ever? I don't know. Hopefully, maybe. I do think I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it has a lot of potential, but it really, really, really needs to be cleaned up massively, which is normal. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm proud of myself for doing this, for getting it done in 22 days for the time that I dedicated to writing each day. Oh, backing up. I don't know for the time I put into it each day, but backing up to that, the 4,000 words a day for me equated to about 2 to 3 hours of writing a day. Yeah, that sounds right. I'd say 2,000 words, and it took me anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how good the ideals were flowing that day. But yeah, so 2 to 3 hours a day was, for me at this time in my life, a very easy amount of time to dedicate to doing this. I very easily could have done more, but I definitely think that there's a point where your brain kind of sort of starts to slow down. Even if you like what you're doing, it just gets a little foggy. So it's important to kind of have a goal that you can get to. And if you're like really going through the day, then you can keep going. Like the day that I finished, I had already hit my 4,000 word mark, and I very easily could have said, okay, 4,000 words, I'll finish tomorrow. But I was literally there. I had to write an epilogue, and the epilogue is short. So I was like, we're going to do this now. And I went ahead and I finished it. But yeah, that's it. I wrote a book in 22 days, 4,000 words a day, and it's done and it's sitting and it needs to be edited, but I'm proud of myself, and maybe this is your sign to write the damn book too. I don't know. I'm not the boss of you.